Number 5 on this list is Enyo. Enyo was the Greek goddess of war and destruction. She was the companion and lover to the other god of war, Ares. Enyo is sometimes depicted as being the child to Zeus and Hera, which also makes her the sister to Ares. Enyo is noted as being extremely destructive, which ties very closely to what she is, the god of destruction. Enyo isn't nearly as well known as Ares, but the little that we do know about her leads people to believe that her bloodlust was almost unrivaled. She apparently liked to incite as much chaos as possible, death and murder bringing her a large amount of joy. She was an extremely skilled fighter as well and would often enter the fray and slice people down with ease. Her fighting skills are considered to be only second to Ares himself. So if you ever did piss her off, then that would likely be the last thing that you do. She was also instrumental in the Great War of Troy and played a large part in facilitating and inciting much of the bloodshed that occurred during that fight. Apparently, she also brought war to the Philippines as well. Not only does her fighting prowess scare me, but what worries me the most about her is her deep love of terror. All of the research that I did on her kept citing that she was a lover of terror and pain. She seems like the type of Greek goddess who would incite a major conflict that could kill thousands just simply because she was bored or to gain pleasure out of it. Definitely not the type of god that you'd want to get on the wrong side of. Number 4 on this list is Apate. Apate is the daughter of Erebus, the god of darkness, and Nyx, the god of the night. She is also the sister to Moros, who we'll get into later in this video. Unlike her parents, she didn't represent darkness or the night, but she represented deceit, lies, deception, fraud. These were all things that Apate excelled at. Being the goddess of deceit, naturally she took an insane amount of pride in lying to others and tricking them. It wasn't enough to just pull the wool over somebody's eyes though, she wanted to ruin people's lives and loved whenever she did it. I'm gonna read off one story that exemplifies the type of trickery that I'm talking about. This comes from the website Greek Gods and Goddesses. In one story involving Apate, Hera, the wife of Zeus, learned about her husband's affair with the Theban princess Semele and looked to Apate for help in punishing the princess. To make matters worse, the princess had a child by Zeus named Dionysus who would become the god of wine. Apate agreed to help and gave Hera a magical girdle which she used to trick Semele into asking Zeus to see his real self, and the princess died as a result. Whenever the gods approached humans, they would appear as something else and hide their true forms because no mere mortal could survive looking directly at a god. This is the type of stuff that Apate would do. Trick somebody into watching as the person they were romantically involved with dies right before their eyes. Evil things that would haunt people's dreams for the rest of their lives. It's one thing to be all-powerful and outright to be able to beat you in a fight, and I'm definitely scared of gods like that, but at least I know with gods like that I'm beat. With a god like Apate, you won't even know that you're in the fight until it's too late. At any point, she could trick you and damn your soul to hell for eternity. Not the type of person that you'd want to have an interaction with. Number 3 on this list is Kronos. Kronos is technically considered a titan, but I'm going to allow it for this video. He was the son of Gaia and Uranus and is one of the most powerful beings in all of Greek mythology. In fact, his power is so vast that he was the one who fathered 3 of the most known Greek gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. He ruled over the world for some time, but before he did that, he's noted as doing a brutal act. In Greek mythology, it goes that Kronos murdered his own father, but to do it, he took a sickle and castrated his dad, and then threw his father's remains into the sea. All of that is very questionable and makes me a tad bit scared of him to begin with, but his vast power is what frightens me the most. Kronos was eventually defeated by his sons, but it took all of their strength to make it happen. He is the god of time and can manipulate it at will. A power like this is almost too strong for any individual to have, even if they are a god. Eventually, Zeus imprisoned his father in the depths of Tartarus, where he should still remain. For the world to prosper under Zeus, Kronos had to be sent away. This scares me as well, because if Kronos ever was to break free from his prison, then his wrath would be vast beyond our knowing, and the world would likely cease to exist. Number 2 on this list is Hades. This wouldn't be a complete list if we didn't talk about the god of the Greek underworld himself. The god of death, to my understanding, wasn't inherently evil at his core. Many people depict death as being an evil thing, and those who facilitate said death to have that characteristic in them. Hades wasn't this way though. He cared for the balance of life as a whole and understood that death was necessary in maintaining that balance. Just because he wasn't evil though doesn't mean we shouldn't fear him. He was cold and stern and unwavering when it came to his position. We also need to remember that he was the god of the underworld, Greece's version of hell. Leaving this place was a big no-no for Hades. He strictly forbade anyone from ever leaving the confines of this underworld and would become extremely enraged if anyone attempted this. His wrath would also know no bounds for those who tried to cheat death or cross him. Legend goes that Pirithous tried to kidnap and wed Hades' wife Persephone. Hades discovered of this plan and tricked him into coming to a feast. Once there, snakes wrapped around his feet and kept him captive until Hades was through with him. Then he was fed to his hound, Cerberus, a three-headed dog which is by Hades' side at all times and acts as a gatekeeper to the underworld. Along with the fact that Hades can be quite brutal if you ever attempt to cross him, he is also incredibly intelligent as well. There's many a story of Hades outsmarting other gods and getting his way. This intelligence, coupled with his immense power and the fact that he's the actual god of death, makes it clear that he's one of the scariest Greek gods to ever exist. Number 1 on this list is Moros. Moros was a premortal deity and is the offspring of Nyx. It's said that Nyx conceived him without any male intervention at all. However, some experts on the subject dispute this, saying that Erebus, the god of darkness, was the father. Moros was feared by all. Even Zeus was reportedly afraid of the ability that this Greek deity possessed. The website Greek Boston has a great article talking about how inherently powerful Moros was, and I'm gonna quote that now. Moros was powerful, so he couldn't just be taken down by another god. He would always find a way to bring misfortune to his impending victims. He was called by the people and the other gods the all-destroying god. Even after his victim died and went to live in death, he did not set them free. He decided to make sure they suffered. He's not only seen as the god of death, but also the god of death and suffering. His name is near to Moros, meaning sullen and ill-tempered, near to the spirit of depression. So that passage gives you an idea of the temperament of this god, but it doesn't explain his ability, and his ability is what scares me most of all. Moros would literally decide your fate of death. He would write it out and then give it to his brother to make sure that his victim's destiny was enforced, and that's exactly what it was. Destiny. If you became aware of your fate and tried to intervene, then chaos would rain down on you and the earth. This is why other gods were scared of Moros. Even though Zeus was extremely powerful, it's said that not even he could go against this destiny, and therefore Moros would have the ability to overpower Zeus in this way if he chose to. This power, along with the fact that he won't ever leave you alone, not even after you've died, is what makes me so fearful of Moros. Anything dark and dreadful that is said to happen in your life, Moros is at the hands of it and guiding you the entire way. Also, every visual representation of him I could find is very dark and reminds me of death. Just another reason why he's one of the scariest Greek gods that ever was.
Coming in at 5, Vritra from India. Vritra was first mentioned in the ancient Aryan Vedic texts as the main adversary of the Indra, aka the king of demigods. Vritra was an asura, which is a spirit that seeks power and dominance, who was represented as mythical dragon-like entity. Vritra, also known as Ahi, which translates to snake, personified through droughts that imprison numerous rivers and water bodies. However, Indra, who was mentioned before, was the god of thunderstorms and rain, and ended the epic battle between king and serpent by successfully destroying 99 fortresses of the beast, and slew the dragon himself by breaking his jaw into 2, with his power being generated from an enchanted drink called Soma. Following the battle, rivers were allowed to flow free once again. Coming in at 4, Ker from Sumeria. Ker is often considered to be the first dragon and is described as residing in the void above the Earth's layer and below the primal sea. This beast is often related to the Sumerian concept of the underworld, and among its horrid exploits, kidnapped the goddess Ereshkigal by taking her into the netherworld realm. Enki was then given the task to rescue the goddess and successfully defeated the dragon, which is depicted in the Epic of Gilgamesh. After Enlil had carried off Earth, after Ereshkigal had been carried off into Ker as its prize, after the father of Ker had set sail. Against the king, the small ones it hurled, against Enki, the large ones it hurled. Its small ones stones of the hand, its large ones stones of the reeds. The keel of the boat of Enki, in battle like the attacking storm, overwhelm. Against the king, the water at the head of the boat, like a wolf devours. Against Enki, the water at the rear of the boat, like a lion strikes down. End quote. Coming in at 3, Python from Greece. The python hailed from the Slin Delphi and is often depicted as the earth dragon. While other sources claim the entity to be a female offspring of Gaia, the earth goddess, the python was described as being so large that her gargantuan coils stretched around the entire site of the Delphi oracle in order to protect her mother. Not only that, but the python was also counted as one of the pets of Hera, who was of course the wife of Zeus, and thus gave her the privilege to cause harm and destruction to the surrounding lands without punishment. However, her destruction finally came to an end when the Olympian deity Apollo slayed the mythical dragon with his bow and arrow. Coming in at 2, Fafnir from Scandinavia. Fafnir is perhaps the most famous dragon on our entire list, but not our number 1, and you'll see why very soon. Fafnir, according to many stories, began its life as a mere dwarf. He was the son of the dwarf king Craidmar and was responsible for killing his own father to obtain wealth and treasure that was stolen from the Aesir gods. However, after he took the treasure out of sheer greed, he was cursed by Andvaris' ring and gold, which was among the loot, a trick which was played by Loki, thus transforming him into a mythical dragon with armoured scales that couldn't be penetrated by regular weapons. However, Sigurd was eventually the hero to slay the beast with his broken sword, Gram, by finding the dragon's weak point along the soft underbelly of the beast. Sounds a lot like Smaug in my opinion. Just saying. Coming in at number 1, Storworm from Scotland. Also known as Master Storworm, this dragon is an evil monster from Orcadian mythology, which are myths pertaining to the Orkney Islands north of Scotland. It's portrayed as having the capacity to cause pestilence and contamination among both plants and animals, and is known to be a glutton, randomly picking 7 victims from nearby settlements for his weekly meal. However, don't fret, in a surprising turn of events, a young boy named Asipatl killed this mythological beast by going inside its belly with a boat and burning the creature's liver. More frightening still, the scope of the dragon goes beyond its tail. Some believe that the monster was an Orkney version of the famous Jormungandr from Norse mythology, aka the world serpent who is predicted to be killed by Thor during Ragnarok.
Kicking off at number 5, the Strigoi. Vampires, vampires, vampires. We love them, they love us, probably, or, well, they love our blood, anyway. But whatever the incarnation throughout culture and folklore, vampirism has managed to strike a chord in the horror hearts of humanity. But in one of their first depictions, the Strigoi of Romanian mythology are far more terrifying than anything else. Their name, which originates from the Latin terms strix and striga, are often correlated to European colloquial terms for witches and warlocks, and a particular type of ill-omened nocturnal flying creature. In Romanian though, the term Strigoi literally means to scream. Spooky. Well, one of the very first historical mentions of the Strigoi was with the infamous Yuri Grando, who we've covered several times on this channel, a man that just wouldn't die despite being dead for 16 years and who had a particular thirst for human blood. As their legend began to pass, the Strigoi became much more correlated towards the conventional vampire we know now. Beautiful, dangerous, pale-skinned creatures, but the real horrifying face of the Strigoi was a twisted, contorted, undead beast that ate children. Coming in next at number 4, the Draugr. If you've ever played the Elder Scrolls series, then you'll be very familiar with these guys, but in actual fact, the origin of the mythological Draugr is much more terrifying than stumbling into one after greedily looting a barrow. In fact, the Draugr could even be considered as the archetypal form of the zombie, just they have a thing for treasure and remembering their past lives. From Old Norse, the term Draugr literally means again walker, but can be traced back to the Proto-Indo-European Draugos, which means phantom or droog, to deceive. In Nordic mythology, these guys are revenants that often lurk in graveyards and cemeteries, unsure what to do with themselves after wistfully being reanimated from the dead. But while they may be decayed sacks of flesh and bones, they're nothing like the modern interpretations of the living dead. They possess superhuman strength, can increase their size at will, and carry the revolting, unmistakable stench of death and decay. I mean, they can't exactly sneak up on you, but if you're ever in the sight of a Draugr, or if you wrong them in their mortal life, you're pretty much done for. In fact, the majority of Norse mythology's bravest warriors couldn't ever defeat a Draugr, and even the most legendary heroes had a tough time in doing so. Not only that though, but a Draugr can also be created at sea, and often have a habit of washing up on shores only to wreak havoc on unsuspecting villages as a terrifying, briny zombie, slightly chewed on by a fish. Swinging in at number 3, the Fae. You might be thinking, fairies? What the hell, Jack? How are fairies scary? But, well, let me tell you a little thing or two about the Fae, because you're pretty much done for once these guys hold a grudge against you. The Fae of Celtic folklore, otherwise known as the Tuathua de Danann, particularly centre around that of Scottish and Irish mythology, and represent a race of mystical entities that reign over an ethereal kingdom in the wild places of the world. In many oral traditions, the Fae have a structural system that resembles a regal regal aristocracy, often having a king and queen as well as many underlings. Despite their often charming and arcane appearance though, their shtick is to use honeyed words and false promises to lure unsuspecting humans to their domain, where their intention is to either torture you as their plaything, straight up kill you, or enslave you to an eternity of psychological discordance. In the mythos of the Fae, there often tends to be two opposing orders, the Seelie or the Light Fae and the Unseelie, the Dark Fae. But don't be fooled, because they're both hellbent on stealing children and leaving behind a changeling, which is a whole other horror story. If you're ever out lost in the forests of Britain, beware the will-o'-the-wisps. Next up at number 2, the Nuckelavee. And we're sticking in the British Isles for a moment because the Scottish Orcadian mythology of the Northern Orkney Islands has one particularly terrifying mythological creature hiding up its sleeve, the Nuckelavee. And this guy was so ingrained in Orkney culture that for hundreds of years, islanders wouldn't even speak its name without immediately saying a prayer after. Picture this, it's the 16th century, you're walking along the shoreline of Stronsay, and in front of you, you see a rider on horseback. But as you get closer, you realize that this rider isn't as he seems, and in fact, it's a skinless man's torso attached to a horse's back whose arms reach to the ground. Its horse legs have fins and gills like a fish, and it has a single giant eye like a burning flame. Also, it emits a miasma of toxic vapors and reeks of death and decay. It was said that the Nuckelavee could wilt an entire field of crops with the demonic stench of its breath, and whenever it approached a lonely traveller, it would let out a terrifying, high-pitched scream that signalled the end of their life. It's not all bad though, because according to Orcadian mythology, this horrifying creature was kept at bay during the summer months by the Mither of the Sea, the great maternal protector spirit of the islands, where she banished the demonic Nuckelavee to the ocean bed. In the winter though, yeah, you're pretty much screwed. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Wendigo. Because when you boil it down, it's hard to find anything more terrifying, both conceptually and physically, than the mythical man-eating Wendigo. Explicitly tied to native Algonquian folklore, the Wendigo has historically been associated with murder, insatiable greed, and the cultural taboo of cannibalism. This horrifying, enormous humanoid creature is tied to the cultural belief system of a number of Algonquian-speaking peoples, including the Ojibwe, the Cree, and the Innu people. It is described as being gaunt to the point of emaciation, with desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. Its complexion is the same ash grey of death, and its eyes are pushed back deep into their sockets, almost resembling a gaunt skeleton exhumed from beyond the grave. In some folklore though, the Wendigo are often described as giants, many times larger than human beings, and it would only grow larger with the more human beings that it had consumed. Its eternal craving for human flesh could never be sated though, and no matter how much it ate, it was always starving. Wherever famine and the cold are, the Wendigo soon follow. Yeah, I don't really need to tell you guys how horrifying the Wendigo are. I mean, just take a look at it.